Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism, a regular show. Nice to have you back. I hope you and yours are all well. It's been a heck of a week again, a heck of a few days. I think it was Harold Wilson that said a week in politics is a long time. At the moment in Scotland, an hour or a day is a long time. So there's lots to discuss this week, and I've got my panel and a couple of special guests for you as well. But let's get the troops on. Let's get Eva there from Kilts. Get Eva on. Eva, my friend, how are you?
Hi, Roddy. Oh, had a fantastic week. I thoroughly enjoyed your midweek edition with Robin. And then the following day, I was in Kirkcudbright for a Yes event. So I'm feeling electrified and energised and looking forward to tonight's show very much.
Good. Oh, the good old Eagle Inn. I was envious of you. I'd love to have been there myself. A nice wee pint as well. Down there in the borders, our Yvonne. Yvonne, my friend, how are you?
I'm fine, but I'm not in the borders.
Oh.
I'm in London.
Londinium. Are you down there on a scouting mission, preparing for the invasion?
It's freezing.
Oh well.
Cold. Not a problem that you'll encounter.
Not at the moment, no. I've got to say it's quite mild here today. And over there in North Dakota, where I believe the snow is 6 foot deep, it's the Coatbridge Cavalier himself, Mr. Boswell. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Yeah, it is very cold. It is very snowy. And I am somewhat envious. I thought Robin was excellent during the week, as Eva said. But particularly Rab Slavin, who I believe is a future in politics, without doubt. And the Eagle Inn. What a venue. What a bunch of people. Fantastic.
Good. But the gang is not complete. We have two more. Now, last week when we were having a great discussion with Lloyd Quinnan, and thank you everyone for all your wonderful comments and interaction with us. It was greatly appreciated. Two names kept coming up, and one of them was Andy Brophy, and who I am delighted to say here, a man who stood twice. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Andy. Twice you stood for the SNP for Westminster, the European Parliament once, and you were an NEC member as well. And in your other life, you're a criminal defence lawyer.
That's correct, yes.
You've come to the right place for that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for inviting me. That was great. I was delighted to be described as a man in a grey kilt last week by certain members of the group. And I haven't had a kilt on since my daughter's wedding last year. I don't wear them that often, but I've got one on tonight. No, I haven't.
Well, but also the other name that, of course, that came up when we were talking about the grey kilts was and not everyone wears a cape, but some people are superheroes, and we have one from down there in Kirkcudbright. We have Steve Norris, the man of the moment. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Roddy. That's a hell of an intro. So I just hope I live up to that billing.
Well, you did get changed in a phone box tonight, I hope, before you come on here. Well, as I said, it's been a heck of a week. We've lost Steve for a minute. Hopefully, Hazel will get him back. But it has been a heck of a week. I've got to start somewhere. And I'd like to start with a bizarre, strange happening with the national newspaper. Now, Phil, I know you're over there in Dakota, but I'm sure you've been following this story. The national newspaper closed down Tasmina Sheikh's weekly column, which would prove very popular with the readers. And then they said that Alex Salmon was barred, and from any interviews, he wasn't to be interviewed. He was persona non grata. Now, this is a paper that's meant to be pro-independence. A bizarre decision, commercially insane decision, but it's sort of the times in Scotland these days, is it not?
Yeah, tragically it is, but we really need to remember who we're dealing with here. The mainstream media has not been a friend of the people for a very, very long time. More than 80% of the media is owned by 5 billionaires. We've known that for a long time, and what's left is largely under the government control with BBC and Channel 4, with most companies having executives that are members of the House of Lords or associated or affiliated with the House of Commons. And license control, the Official Secrets Act are all used as tools to keep people in line, to keep any of the publications in line. And if you're out of line, they'll either shut you down or buy you out. And it's Richard Desmond, you know. It's Jonathan Harmsworth, Viscount Rothermere, the Barclay brothers, and Rupert Murdoch. And these men, most of whom who live abroad, you don't need a conspiracy theory for these men to work against the people, or these organisations to work against the people. They only have to act in their own and the establishment's best interests, which is what they do at every turn. So no, the National sacking Tasmina and barring Alex effectively. The question is, can we now say the National is not a pro-independence newspaper? It never was. It's part of the NewsQuest group, people, that owns the Herald. Fifth columnists from day one, this was always the case. The last thing you would do would be allow an independence movement to have an audience and to transmit our message, our truths. That's the last thing they want. So it's not surprised that the Daily Record's promoting Humza for leader and trashing everybody else, and that the unionist media's backing Humza. You know, you wake up, people. Wake up. What does it say when there are individuals within the SNP that the establishment media support? Terrible.
I'll come on to that enough. Yvonne, of course, you're a resident journalist. It didn't make, to me, commercial sense. I mean, it's not as if I've got a massive readership, and they've actually trashed a good percentage of it. But I'm trying to work out now which is it's referred to affectionately as an SNP in-house fanzine, but the Daily Record's catching up fast. It seems to be very pro-SNP. And again, this is things that I would never have expected in my lifetime, that the Daily Record would be sort of helping try to get an SNP leader elected, unless they have an ulterior motive.
Well, you know, maybe we shouldn't be paying that much attention, because I'm just looking now at the ABC figures, which are the audit of newspapers around the country. And even if this paper is backing Humza Yousaf, that's not really a big deal. They've only got 345 paid subscriptions. I mean, that is really low. I've put out a few tweets to Laura Webster, the editor of the National, saying, you know, what justification do you have by gagging Alex Salmond? You know, many have tried and they've all failed. And all she's going to do is really shine an even bigger light on Alex Salmond and his achievements. This is the trouble with these people. You can't rewrite history. You know, Alex's stunning achievement there on record for all to see. And to sack Tasmina Shakes, you know, from her column, which was excellent, and to say, oh, we're not going to give any oxygen to Alex Salmond. These sort of decisions, I don't think, are actually made by the editor. It's made well above her pay grade. She just has to obey orders. And if I was her and she wants to be taken seriously as a female editor, then she should tell them to sod off and do an exclusive interview with Alex and show that the paper is not only a real independence-minded paper, but show that she's an independent-minded editor. At the moment, she's just a lackey, you know, somebody who's having her strings pulled by the publisher.
Mm-hmm. And Andy, as an old stager in the party as well, it's been some other bizarre things going on. Now, it was revealed that the GCHQ have been asked to supervise or monitor the security for the SNP leadership election. Now, I find it bizarre that you would go to the British spies and ask them to supervise a Scottish National Party election.
Yep. Well, very, very strange. When I joined the SNP, which was almost exactly 40 years ago, just over 40 years ago when I joined first, there were 2 MPs in the party. There was, I think, a national organiser, and I think there was maybe a couple of researchers. They were, to my knowledge, the only people who were actually paid to do any work for the SNP. There were 5 people, 6 at the most. I don't know what the figure is now, but it's considerably more than that. And the idea that these 2 MPs and all the senior party figures at that time would be bringing in British intelligence to operate an election is quite extraordinary. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it, as far as I can see. There are other organisations that would be able to do it. Why you want to go to the heart of the British establishment, the heart of the intelligence establishment, and ask them to operate a Scottish National Party election, which is a party which is designed to essentially break up the state, for which these are the intelligence agencies. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It doesn't seem to be any rationale for it at all. But then that's in keeping with a lot of SNP government policy. I'm afraid there's no rationale, rhyme or reason or intelligence to it.
No, there is not. Eva, I was happening to, well, hopefully Steve will come in. He seems to be having a few difficulties with his connection tonight. But the other one is that came out in the news this week to just compound everything even more, was that it turns out that Alan Smith MP, your MP indeed, is he not? Or your neighbouring MP?
He's the MP for Stirling.
Stirling, yeah. Anyway, the MP, he's employed someone who was 27 years at GCHQ. Bizarre that we would be inviting people who had worked for the British Secret Service.
Bizarre in the extreme on one view, but on the other hand, not at all surprising. I think that the block that I got from Alan Smith on Twitter was delivered immediately after I commented adversely about him sitting in Ukraine, and this was before the war started. He was sitting with 2 of his SNP colleagues, delivering some speech to camera about their mission, and in front of him was a Union Jack. I've never given a speech with a Union Jack in front of me. I hope I never do. I don't buy produce that has a Union Jack on it. I know that not everybody thinks the same as me, but I thought that it was terribly and awfully symbolic that the 3 of them were sitting there behaving in that fashion. So I'm not actually surprised if he employs people who used to work for the British state. Some people think he works for the British state, and I think there's a lot of evidence to that effect. Comments from senior colleagues of his within the SNP indicate that their motivation is not in fact independence or the breakup of the United Kingdom. That's why we've seen the change in vocabulary. Instead of talking about fighting for independence, we talk about defending Scotland's democracy. It's a sham and it's farcical. What we should have had in the course of the last few years is an electrifying debate about the need for independence. But instead of it being electrifying, it's been stunning and shocking in the extreme to see how that great party has fallen. It's the reason why many of us are in ALBA, or it's the reason why others who've not joined ALBA have left the SNP and are now without a party. It's embarrassing and it's no good for Scotland. It's like the Nationals' decision not to publish either Tasmina's columns, which were well received, very well read, very popular, professionally written, and always absolutely on the button. Their decision not to publish her articles and to not allow an interview with Alex Salmond, arguably the greatest political leader Scotland has ever had, is not just petty, stupid, deleterious. It is positively harmful to the people of Scotland and the cause of Scottish independence. There's no way around any of that. It's an act of folly, and as is Alan Smith's behaviour in the nature of the people that he appears to employ and his own conduct. These people are not friends of Scotland, let alone the cause of Scottish independence.
Can I just say?
I just couldn't say to you, Steve, that not everybody leaves the SNP. Some stay you've seen some anomalies in this election, which you highlighted for everybody. What do you make of everything that's going on?
Well, first of all, on the wider Yes movement, Roddy, I do agree with Evie that we need to make sure that every single person that claims to adhere to the independent side has got to understand a few things. One of them is that, some people bang on about Alba this and Alba that, but people forget that 90% at least of Alba members are former SNP members. And this means that, any kind of idea somehow that the
Hopefully we'll get Steve back in a minute or two. Moving on from that, Phil, in a similar vein, Craig Murray managed to tell us just that Humza, who is about to, in this competition, to be the leader, and very much the choice of the establishment, that Humza was selected by the CIA and taken for us the Visitors Leadership Programme. I believe it's a 6 months course, or 8 weeks, is it, in luxury? Yep. And this is why, possibly going back to Eva's point, that we have so many of our MPs going to, for example, there was the two MPs, David Linden and I can't remember the other one, who dressed up in British Army fatigues for a picture. We've had Alan Smith and Stuart MacDonald, who's also been to this CIA thing, going to Ukraine and talking up British foreign policy. We've got the SNP supplying money for arms. I mean, who would have believed it? The world's gone crazy, Phil.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's further to the points that have been made by Andy and Eva, and indeed anyone who's been paying attention. There's a pattern forming here. Your list is reasonably comprehensive, but there's more. Alan Smith employing a senior staffer who spent something like 27 years at GCHQ. That's not acceptable. That's enemy in our midst. And then the MPs in fatigues, David Linden, and there's a few others playing boy soldiers. Then there's people haven't spoke about this. There's also a scheme that we were all invited to when I was down there. That's the MPs and SNPs have taken up, and I won't name them here, but you've got your chance to get out. People, be warned, you will be named in future. You become a major in the British Armed Forces for also playing toy soldiers. You get to wear the uniform and swan about. And what you mentioned about Alan Smith being groomed, he's being groomed, which makes a change for MPs being groomed instead of doing the grooming. But then there's the likes of Stuart MacDonald, Alan Smith, etc., all championing NATO and the right-wing hawkish nature of what NATO has become, just a patsy and a pawn for the wider military-industrial complex expansion and following the GCHQ line. Then Humza's 8 weeks leadership programme, or grooming as I've called it, I mean, as revealed by Craig Murray, excellent work again from Craig. The USA government is not Scotland's ally in gaining independence, people. The people of America are wonderful, and I must say, it's not lost on the American people that independence from the UK turned out pretty well for them, and they would wish the same for the people of Scotland and Ireland, especially here in the Midwest. So no, all of this really, really has to stop, as they are a major part of the reason that the SNP leadership and management have turned away from the high road to independence. This is very much the low road to nowhere.
Oh, good line. Steve, you're back. You were in full flight there when we lost you. No, go on. Can you remember where you were?
Just about, I was talking about how it's very important to understand that we will only win independence with the entire Yes movement on board. There's no place for division and rancor, because, to be honest, we've got to understand one thing, Roddy, that we've got to know who our adversary is, and it's not anybody on the Yes side, either inside the SNP or outside it. That's why I've stayed inside the SNP. Our enemy or our adversary lies in London and the establishment, and there's got to be in the party and without the party a fundamental understanding of the scale of what we're up against. First and foremost, it's no good walking around below a concrete wall marked the Great Union of the United Kingdom, waving a wee flag saying, I'm in favour of independence. That just won't cut it. What we need to do is to devise a strategy to break down that wall. And the only way we can do that is to harness the power of the Scottish people, the individual power of them. I mean, after all, that's where power lies and nowhere else. And as I mentioned before several times, we've got to understand that unless or if the party or if the people give us an absolute majority to do something, then we are it's beholden upon us to deliver it. Now, this really angered me, Roddy, if I may continue for a wee second, about the election in 2021. That was the biggest mandate ever, probably in the history of the United Kingdom for anything. And that referendum was promised to the people of Scotland. And suddenly, what do? We go to the Supreme Court in England asking if it's okay to hold a referendum. Now, why was that? Why was that? I don't know, because nobody's explained it to me, and people were livid about it. Worse than that was that when that verdict was delivered, well, surprise, surprise, it was a no. The response from the SNP, which I thought might have been, well, okay, let's take a wee while to consider the implications of the verdict, was, okay, then that's fine, we accept the verdict. Why was that? Nobody's told us. Now, I've got to tell you that I've written to the International Court of Justice, and I've made a submission to them, and I'm quite happy to share it with whoever wants to see it. And I got a response from the ICJ. So I'm going to put that out there and let people make their own minds up about what maybe certain people should be saying about making Scotland's case internationally. Maybe the ICJ is a difficult one because of the way in which you can hear appeals and cases. It's tricky. But what we should be doing is to assemble the best constitutional brains in the country, get them around the table, whoever the next First Minister is, and say, look, we need advice on this. We need to go international. We have a Scottish diaspora of 30 million people in America and Canada, New Zealand and Europe, and we need to be bringing them on board. But first of all, we need to be saying to people, look, we've got a case internationally. Let's explore every avenue to see if we've got traction. And if we have, then perhaps even the issue of the referendum itself could be reopened, because I am not happy the way that mandate is simply cast aside, Roddy.
Quite right too. Well, on the international side of things, Eva, I know you're really excited about it, but the SNP have appointed Chris Law to carry the international message to our international audience.
I'm going to speak with a straight face. I'm not going to laugh about this because it's so pitiful. This is another example of the SNP stealing Alba's policies. You've maybe seen the video that Alba put out tonight, where they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, because obviously Humza thinks that he's been smart because he's stolen our policy relative to fuel and energy and a stake that the public should have in alternative energy sources, etc., and renewables. We've got Kate Forbes in relation to our line on child poverty and the child payment. And we've got Ash Regan on the Independence Convention. So another angle to our independence policy is that in addition to political action in Scotland and in Westminster, there should be international approaches made. And that has been the Alba position since day one. It amazes me that the SNP have got to appoint somebody now in 2023 and give them a title and a job description and a remit to speak to people on the international stage. Because what the hell have they been doing since Nicola became the leader in November 2014? She's had 8.5 years to engage with people on the international stage. Why has she not been doing it? But she has been doing it because we've seen innumerable press releases with Nicola's photo showing her opening individual offices in various different places around the world, particularly in mainland Europe. So I don't know what's going on. Is this just a boost for Chris Law's personal publicity? Has it been noted by somebody in the SNP that his jacket is on a shaky nail and that if there is a Westminster election, he may not get re-elected? Is this just an attempt to get his face on the front cover of the newspaper occasionally, because up until now, Chris Law seems not to have done terribly much for his constituents or for the cause of Scottish independence. So I have grave reservations about why this is happening. I absolutely agree that we need international action. We need friends around the world. We need friends in every single country on the planet.
Yep.
But is Chris Law the person to go and achieve that for Scotland?
Yeah.
I very much doubt it.
Roddy, can I just come in there, Roddy? Is that okay?
Sure.
I'm leaving Chris Law out of this for various reasons, which should be self-evident. What I would say is, if you remember, Nicola Sturgeon went to, I think it was Strasbourg, and met with Jean-Claude Juncker. And she walked on, I think it was a stage or a dais or something, and the body language between Nicola and Jean-Claude Juncker was amazing. It was like a meeting of old friends, if you like, of kindred spirits. And it was absolutely wonderful to see that Scotland's First Minister had a very close relationship with a premier politician, or representative at least, of the European Union. And I can tell you that the UK government was incandescent at that this meeting was put across the world stage, to the extent that they withdrew consular services from the First Minister round about Europe. Now, that tells me that if Nicola and the SNP government weren't convinced that somehow they could work with the UK government on the constitution before, then they should have been after it. Because what more evidence did they need that the UK government treats Scotland like some kind of second-class colony? And that should have been the sign. But nothing happened. Nothing was done. Not even that convinced the Scottish government that they should have acted upon the mandate from the people to remain within the European Union. We had Ian, who I know Ian very well, Ian Blackford, promising us that we wouldn't have ripped out of the EU against her. Well, what was behind that statement? And the suspicion is that there wasn't very much, because nothing happened. So that's why we've got to re-examine. I can tell you there are people in Europe asking themselves, what in God's name is Scotland doing? They say they want to be a European nation. They've got a mandate to ask the people that question, and yet nothing is happening. Why? So that's got to change, and change very quickly.
Absolutely, we've got to do that. But in the meantime, we've got to do it with a new leader, Andy. And it's going to be one of the three. I mean, the voting opens on Monday. It goes on for another fortnight. But as Robin pointed out in our midweek show, usually you'll find 60 or 70% of the people who are going to vote will vote in the first few days. Yeah. So while we might not know it, probably the die will be cast by Tuesday who our new leader is going to be. And we have three very different candidates. But one of the things that's strange, and I wrote about it today in my blog, is that the payroll is certainly almost to a man and woman behind Humza, who has admitted that he thinks that Nicola was the greatest politician ever, and if she couldn't get independence, there's no way to do it, and he doesn't see a quick route to it. Now, I can't fathom out for the life of me why you would then get everyone supporting someone who says, well, actually, I don't know how to do it.
Well, quite so. And one of the things that was or is used against Nicola by unionists generally is this kind of the once in a generation thing, which I think was a slip of the tongue during the referendum campaign. But in any event, it was used, and that there was a clear majority. And there was a clear majority in 2014. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It was quite a defeat. In one view, it was quite a defeat. But the whole thing changed with the Brexit vote in 2016. Now, the once in a generation argument flies off when you have a major constitutional change against our wishes, quite very strongly expressed. So, well, whatever you think of Brexit, it doesn't matter, because 66%, whatever the percentage was, voted against it, and yet we've been affected by it. If there ever was a material change of circumstances, that's the clearest ever constitutional change of circumstances, material constitutional change of circumstances. And in the 7 years since that vote in June 2016, the SNP has not made that case consistently to the Scottish people, and because it has to be made to the Scottish people. And it's not been made properly, because there's a material change of circumstances. There's the reason for the second referendum. and it hasn't been made. For some reason, Nicola got caught up in the whole thing, the kind of Joe Swinson stop Brexit, taking the British government to court over a referendum result. I said at the time it was a hostage to fortune. It's coming back to haunt us. And then COVID arrived, and the whole thing has gone up in smoke. And the whole the opportunity that was given by the Brexit vote for us as a movement to move towards independence, it's really been squandered over 7 years. And we're now into a situation where that currency, not the currency debate, but the currency of the Brexit vote representing a material change of circumstances has been debased by the inaction of the leadership in the SNP, primarily by Nicola. And when we went into the 2019 general election, where the whole matter was Brexit in England, England voted 54-46 for Brexit. It wasn't close in England. 54-46 in England. It was very clear. And we went into that election in 2019 with the slogan, "Stop Brexit." Now, what did we expect? Okay, we got the seats. But to paraphrase an old slogan from the 1980s, winning elections is not enough. Just like wearing badges is not enough. And we won that general election, the UK general election in 2019, hands down. What good did it do us? It's actually taken us backwards.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And that slide is going on with the recent opinion polls, Phil, have shown that we're actually back at 2014 numbers in favour of independence. Just yesterday they announced a result in Edinburgh where the SNP vote is down by 6%. And one thing that the voters don't like is divided parties. Now, hopefully there will be a bounce when you get a new leader. But Mary Black this week came out and said that if Kate Forbes is elected by the members, democratically elected by the membership of the SNP, that there's a strong possibility she won't be able to support her and there will be a split within the party. We've had the Greens saying they'll walk away if they don't elect Humza. We've had Shona Robinson saying she can't serve under Kate. This doesn't say unity to the members or to the public, does it?
No, and it's why a radical clear-out is required. The SNP has been infiltrated. So what I would say to Mary is, shut up, Mary. And I must say, Mary was a good kid when she came to Westminster. She came for the right reasons, comes from a very, very good family, good principled people, and she's a good person. I've no doubt about that. And she certainly came down for the right reasons. But the whole LGBT infatuation has not only gotten out of hand, but it's the chink in Mary's armour that has allowed her head to be turned. And remember, that is the modus operandi of the establishment when you go down to Westminster. Egos are massaged, bank accounts are filled, and you're told that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So the reality, Mary, is there has been and always will be a split in the party, while some idiots view LGBT rights as more important than independence, or any other rights for that matter, other than perhaps the right to freedom of speech. Shona Robinson, she said she won't serve in Forbes' cabinet. Would she be asked? No, she wouldn't. And we need rid of such patsies. I mean, there's now a massive disconnect between the management of SNP and grassroots. It's obviously true, and more grassroots people are catching on. The Greens threatening a way to walk if Hums is not elected. Good. Well rid of these clowns. Oh, yeah. Let's get back on track and clear out and go again. The establishment have severely damaged the SNP through the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of Nicola and the other childish actors. It's time to grow up and accept responsibility. Notice how these Waynes never talk about responsibility. They only talk about rights. It's exceedingly naive. As adults, we know, whilst your rights are my responsibility, my rights are also your responsibility. They choose to ignore this reciprocity. And it's fundamental. It's a fundamental weakness in pretty much all of their arguments, as is the case with most spoiled kids when they stamp their tiny feet. You know, we need to defeat the children's politics that has been applied as a deliberate infestation to the SNP, encouraged and enabled by the British establishment, and get fully focused on Indy. Let's get this massive clear out. It's required. I'd happily execute that and wield the knife. I mean, it's like just listening to the utter nonsense these clowns spout. I mean, remember the one about teenage MPs and MSPs? I want a teenage MSP and MP, and I'm paraphrasing someone else who I can't give credit to because I forget who it was. I want that as much as I want a teenage heart surgeon operating on me. Clowns.
Yvonne, I know you've been faithfully watching all the hustings and have not been overly impressed. And we've heard that it's the same audience virtually at them all have been lined up. It's sold out immediately, all different hustings. But what's come across in the hustings is that Holmes has been very clear that he is going to keep what they call the progressive side of the party. He's going to challenge the Section 35. Which to, and probably I should have probably asked this to our lawyer friends here on the show. There is no chance that the Supreme Court, I'm not a lawyer, and if perhaps our lawyers can interject, the Supreme Court's not going to go against Westminster sovereignty. And that's what they would have to do to reject the Section 35. It's a waste of money, time and effort, and takes us off what we need.
Absolutely. And I've watched most of the hustings now. The very first one, which was organised by the SNP, was well dodgy. Every single question that was put forward came from an SNP councillor. And a friend of mine who's in the SNP said he'd gone to the event to speak, and he said you couldn't move for councillors. He'd never seen that many together. And it was strange how Mike Russell was able to pick them out, although he did that big theatrical sort of, oh, I can't see anybody but the guy in this jacket and that jacket. And they all turned out to be pro-Humza people as well. You know, I've got a very bad feeling about this whole hustings business. I think it's a pure theatre. I think there are dark forces at work. You know, you've mentioned GCHQ, and I was involved in their biggest leak in 2003 when an email came from America ordering British intelligence to spy on every single member of the UN Security Council.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no outrage that America was asking the Brits to do that, but they obviously went ahead and did it. Now, apart from that being purely illegal, it shows you the relationship and the reputation of British intelligence. And it wouldn't surprise me if these dark forces are circling over Holyrood. And of course, some people are so daft as to probably think employing somebody from GCHQ is quite a good idea. You know, if you lie down with dogs, you pick up fleas. And very briefly on the Chris Law appointment, and I'm saying this directly to Chris Law, I hope you're watching this, but only footballers and folk singers should have a ponytail. Cut it off, Bonnie lad. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, if you're going to represent Scotland on the international stage, look like the man capable of doing it. And as I say, not some folk singer or failed footballer from Doncaster Rovers. Apologies to the Rovers fans there. So that's my sort of penny's worth. The hustings have I can't think of a single election which has involved 12 hustings. It's ridiculous. When are they going to have time to go out and meet?
That's the point, is it not? Is that not the point? The point is so they don't have time. I mean, maybe I'm just an old cynic.
I mean, the highlight for me was Kate Forbes taking down Hamza Yusuf. It was brilliant.
Not a hard job, though. It's not difficult, is it? Steve, you've been involved in the hustings. Have you been comfortable with them?
Well, I've got to say, the Dumfries hustings which I spoke at, I'll come on to that in a minute. I thought it was very good hustings, I've got to say. There was a good mix of views. There was actually, the last one before there was a bit of a argy-bargy between the various candidates. There was quite a good camaraderie between the three after it, saying, oh, we're all work with each other and so on. But there's some very pointed questions from the audience. And I've got to say this, I raised the issue about grassroots party democracy and how if the SNP is to be anything, it's got to rediscover its democratic power, as I put it. Because I'll tell you something, when the SNP once upon a time fired on all cylinders and led the Yes movement as it should always do, the unionists really were quaking in their shoes. Now, that modus operandi has gone, and that's got to be restored before anything else. And that's why I said at the moment, where you've got a hierarchical structure, where you've got one branch with a direct line to HQ, they control that line, and yet you've got between 600 and 800 branches who can't even talk to each other laterally, if you can imagine a pyramid. Now that's ludicrous, because as I made the point, if there's branches in Skye or Le Havre or Aberdeenshire or the Borders or Glasgow or Edinburgh or Galloway have a brilliant idea, how in God's name are they supposed to share it with each other? We can't do it. And you could argue, I wouldn't do it, but some would argue that that's in HQ's direct interest to prevent that happening, which is actually sometimes reflected in the anodyne nature of the conference agenda, because 9 out of 10 decent resolutions where there may be some fiery debate is snuffed out before it gets anywhere near the draft resolutions. So for all those reasons, the SNP has really got to rediscover its democratic power once again. And if I may say, I've got an idea which I floated. I've got some draft notes here, if I've got time, Roddy, if you don't mind.
That's why you're here.
Right, okay. Well, you know how there's been aspersions cast against the veracity of the My Voice poll, and so on, how that we don't really know how many voters there are and so on. Well, I wouldn't agree necessarily with the allegations of doubt about the veracity of the poll. What I would say is that each individual candidate, the 3 candidates, have an absolute right to know how many voters there are. In any other election, outside, a normal election, of course, know how many electors there are. Well, that information should be made available to all the candidates, and as a matter of course, and even where they are. Why not? So if I was the candidates, and I hope they're listening to this after the debate or might check this place out, is ask the HQ for what the electorate is, so you can target your message accordingly. Now, secondly, and this is where I'm coming on to the idea, just as a kind of democratic exercise, why, as an informal shadow poll of the main one, why don't branch secretaries in each individual branch across the country become, as it were, informal returning officers, where they ask the permission of all their membership, which isn't a difficult thing to do as a branch secretary, if it's okay for them to tell them how they voted and rank their candidates 1 to 3. If that was achieved across the whole country, you would have a result, an informal result, but you'd certainly have a good picture of how the voting was. Now, from my point of view, that isn't, as I say, I have to reiterate, that isn't casting aspersions on the veracity of the main poll, but what it would do would be, firstly, to reconnect with the membership, and secondly, and more importantly, it would be a great democratic exercise in that it's bound to increase their turnout. Having said that, it would be, if you like, an exit poll, because it would have to be conducted really when the the poll was obviously nearly finished to get a complete composite picture of how the entire membership has voted. So what it would do perhaps is to increase or bring on board people who maybe hadn't voted or missed the email or forgotten to vote, and they might give them a wee reminder, oh, I better vote again. But most importantly, though, it would give the party, and I mean the party, an overall picture through their entire branch secretaryship about how the members voted. And I think it'd be a great exercise to do. So there's a challenge to the three candidates. Suggest that and see if this flies or not. I don't know what the rest of the panel think of that as an idea, but it's something I've done a little bit of work on, and I think it's an exercise in democracy. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I think the first thing they should do, going back, is bring back National Council and National Assembly. That was the most democratic part of the SNP, and it's something that the Alapa Party have copied, but they have implemented it. And it was a great way for policy. It was a great way for the ordinary members to get to, get their point across. So I think that'd be another thing you should look at. Eva, we have an election coming up, and as Steve's hit a point, and everyone that's in this show is always the same, we believe in unity. I believe in unity. I've been screaming for it for even before Alapa days, going back to 2019, begging with Nicola Sturgeon to reinvigorate the Yes movement and include everyone. Unity is needed. The candidates, Ash Reagan has been in touch with all the different party leaders. She's been in touch with all under one banner, who incidentally, folks, will be here next week, along with the ISP leader, Colette Walker. They've been in touch with all these people to do it. The other two have not been quite so open. In fact, they've been talking about, energising the SNP membership only. But as Steve said right at the beginning of this show, we need every pro-independence person pushed in the same direction.
This is a great worry, Roddy. It really is. I wrote something the other night, and one of my lines in it was that Scotland is not a nation of dunces. And the SNP is not a party full of dunces. And the difficulty with the SNP is that they're not now the party that they were in the 80s and the 90s, because you could go to a party conference then and you could listen to speeches from people who were inspired and inspirational of all ages, from all backgrounds, from various different beliefs. But they were fired up with the notion of independence, and ours was a party then, because it was my party then too, as it was yours. It was a party where we were driven by the precious prize of independence, not for the sake of independence alone, but because of what we could do our country and what we could do for our people. And that is what has been lost over the years by the SNP leadership, not the SNP grassroots in the main, not at all. But where we've got to now is on Thursday night, when I was in Coatbridge in the Eagle, hosted by Robert Slavin, that was not an Alba meeting. It was a Yes Coatbridge and Christen meeting. And the beauty was that the panel comprised me from Alba, David Henry from SSRG, Julie McAnulty from the Independence for Scotland Party, and Patrick Rowlink, the comedian. Patrick, Julie and David were fantastic. There was nobody from the SNP, although they had been asked to send somebody. But there were a number of SNP members and supporters in the audience. And to an individual, every single person in the room said the same thing. Scotland needs the independence movement to be united. And again, every individual in the room said it was perfectly clear that Humza Yousaf will not seek to unite the independence movement. And there are two reasons that were given by the people in the room for this. One was that he seemed, actually, despite everything that he says to the contrary, he seemed quite happy not to prioritise independence, has seemed only to speak about independence, mainly when other people have pointed out that he's not doing it. He said that Nicola Sturgeon was the smartest politician that he'd ever known. He was not as smart as her, and if she couldn't get independence, neither could he. So he wants regional assemblies where members of the party, not the people of Scotland in the main, not the people in the movement, but members of the party tell him how he's to go about getting independence. And he thinks that he can say that and be the leader. He's made himself a laughingstock amongst his own members. He is also divisive and very silly and very short-sighted in relation to challenging the Section 35. Everybody knows he's going to lose, but he thinks he can turn an argument about a bill that is mainly very unpopular into a constitutional argument where he pretends that he's going to be David against Goliath. Again, he's just making a fool of himself, a fool of Scotland, and wasting a lot of money if he goes down that road. So the vast majority of the people at last night's meeting thought that for Scotland and for Scottish independence, Ash Regan was the best choice because she was the only one that spoke with any degree of understanding at all that we're not going to get independence without unity of the movement. There was a few jokes cracked, obviously, about Patrick Harvey and whether or not he'd heard his voicemail, but everybody in the room said the same thing, that the SNP on their own cannot do it. Doesn't matter if you're talking about de facto referenda or talking about a Westminster election or a Holyrood election or whatever the hell it is, there's no chance that the SNP can move mountains and create Scottish independence or the circumstances for it on their own. They need to take the rest of us with them. You see behind me who's sitting in my wee bag there, deliberately, because Alex Salmond is the big beast with the knowledge, the strategy, the understanding, the plans, the proposals, the policies, and the ability to negotiate and promote policies that secure Scottish independence far better than anybody who's currently standing to be leader of the SNP. So what we need is proper discussions and negotiations between all the big beasts in the independence movement so that all the power and all the ability and the knowledge and the experience of everybody in the Scottish independence movement is harnessed for the good of Scotland without delay.
Indeed. In fact, talking of two things, one in those days, all us SNP people who remember, the other one was that these conferences, Jerry Fisher wouldn't let things slip. He was up there to make sure there was no shenanigans. So Jerry, God love him. And the other one, I was just thinking, it came to me as you were talking there about Alec. If our movement was united again as it was in 2014, one unit moving as one, who would be better than Alex Salmond to be doing the international relations, going round speaking to foreign diplomats and government? Who would get access better than Alex Salmond? A waste of a talent that's sitting there. Andy, the one thing that's coming across to me, and it's been highlighted again here anecdotally by Eva and some of the things that Steve's been saying over the last weeks or so, there seems to be a disconnect between the payroll and the grassroots within the SNP.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not a recipe for harmony.
No, I mean, what you were saying about National Council, National Assembly, my memories in the 80s of the democracy in the SNP, it was astonishingly good. And the one debate I remember very clearly was the 1984 conference debate about independence in Europe, which was a titanic event. The place was absolutely full. It was Jim Sellers and Jim Fairley going to each other. It was fantastic to see. And that policy was adopted, as I remember, by 4 votes. But the whole argument was thrashed out. Everyone had their say. All the points were put, and then there was a vote on it. Now, contrast that with the First Minister of Scotland announcing to the world that we are now not going to use our natural resources. We will not do it, she said. And when was that decided? When was that debated? When was that voted on? When was there a mandate for that? And bringing Green ministers into the government and saying that we're not going to use our natural resources. It's an astonishing position. And our nearest neighbours who we pray and aid for independence all the time, the Norwegians certainly aren't doing that. That Norwegian government pension fund, which you can look at clocking up the money on a website as it does every minute, that which was established in the 1990s. So the UK government could have done that even without an independent Scotland. But they're not saying they're not going to use their own natural resources. It's a scandalous position for a leader of a nation to take, as Nicola has done. And without any democratic mandate and without any electoral mandate, it's an astonishing position that the country finds itself in just now.
And I think, Phil, I think that fund of the Norwegians is sitting at 2 trillion or something.
It's the largest in the world.
2 trillion. They lend money to the British governments and the US government's interest. And they've got enough for their welfare for the next, I don't know, 5 generations or something.
Oh, yeah.
But on oil, there was a point brought up in the midweek show, Phil, where the other one the Norwegian government did was to set up Statoil. Every time they sold a license to one of the international, to Exxon or whoever, they demanded a share in that oil field. And that helped feed into this fund we're talking about, the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Why didn't we do that? Why didn't we do that when we sold our wind, or wave and wind, or green energies? Why didn't we say yes, but we take a stake, we retain 5% and everything?
Because most of the talent that's capable of understanding and doing this have been removed from the SNP leadership at the minute. But it's probably more to do with the fact that the SNP are no longer working for the people of Scotland. The SNP leadership are working for themselves. And that's the real tragedy here. The Norwegian way, the philosophy is every barrel counts. I've spoken about it a few times. It's several shows on its own. But the Wealth Fund is for the people of Norway. Norway is for Norwegians. It looks after its own. It puts its own house in order first. And every barrel counts philosophy. It's just how you manage the reserves with enhanced oil recovery, using Inconels and stainless steel, managing the longevity of the systems, looking at for power, offshore, onshore. There's so many initiatives here that are right for the people and were determined for the people's benefit by people who had the people of Norway's best interests at heart. That cannot be said in Scotland. It's why all these mistakes are being made. It's why, and it comes back down to Andy's point in democracy or lack of it. The one and only democratic event I saw in SNP was the fox hunting debate when we went down, the 56 went down in 2015. Everyone had their voice heard, everyone spoke. Nicola almost lost it, similar to the result Andy spoke about in 86, and that was a Westminster Hall debate. That was the last time we were all listened to or get a chance to voice our opinions. It never happened again under Nicola, and it just went downhill from there. So no, it's tragic to see. It's tragic to see, and I lament the current state of affairs in SNP.
Well, can I just say, well, number one, I've not given up my party. I think it is recoverable, but it's a pretty touch and go situation just now. I will say that. I think it is recoverable. I think the membership, my experience of the membership is overwhelmingly that they have no antipathy whatsoever to Alba or anybody else for that matter, because they see the big picture. And they know that if we all pull together, we can still win it. There is still an independence majority out there. And I just wonder what would happen if we got the SNP back on track and they open its arms once again to the wider Yes movement, what Alba's position would be. I've been told by not a few Alba members that if the SNP truly displayed to the wider Yes movement of Scotland, they may consider their membership of Alba and rejoin. I've had that said to me many times, but that's a big ask and a big leap from where the SNP
can I answer
is
that for you?
to get to where that for sure. Okay.
There's Johnny D's our techie guy in here. Back in 2016, before there was any split or any new parties, he said to me, Roddy, we should start up the Barhead Independence Party, because this Holyrood Dehont system, we're at a disadvantage. We need a second party to maximise it. They've got 3 parties, and we need at least 2 parties. So I think we need at least two independence parties to maximise the vote at Holyrood to enable us to control our own destiny. And I don't think that people necessarily need to go back into the SNP, but if we're all in the one movement, if we're all pushing the same direction, and we're not standing over each other's toes and we're cooperating, then it's a great idea, in my humble opinion, to have 2 parties. And I don't see the Alapa party going away. That's just my opinion. But as I was going to say, the clock is ticking away. A couple of things I want to. No, you don't need to go yet. Oh, that wasn't because of my answer that we lost Steve there. But I really need to ask Yvonne, because I know this is a burning question for her. On Friday, we got a new Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward. Now, I know that must have excited you almost as much as baby boxes, Yvonne. What did you think of that? You're on mute. Are you on mute, or are you just saying nothing?
No, actually, it was probably just as well I was on mute. Otherwise, I would have been
well, that was the plan. That was the plan.
But, well, I said off with their heads. I mean, really, I cannot see the point of the royal family. I'm really distressed at the thought of King Charles getting his hands on the stone for his coronation. And I think that we, because it is so rich in symbolism, I think that we need to do something to stop that stone from leaving Edinburgh Castle. Just because of the symbolism, we need to let the people in London know who we are, why we want independence, and how they can't just come and plunder things in Scotland as and when they like. And, you know, I was down in fact, I was having tea with Jeremy Corbyn. My goodness, if anybody knows what a duplicitous, treacherous, backstabbing place the Palace of Westminster is, then he does. And I just think that we need to do something to stop any of these beefeaters or whatever they are coming up north to take the stone. Yeah, we need to send them back with a flea in their ear.
Correct. Well, Ash and Alec both said don't give it back. In fact, Alec put it, why should we give them stolen goods? It belongs to Scotland, and we shouldn't hand over, say, you stole it, have it back. No, you're right. He should only be allowed to use it in Edinburgh when he's made King of Scots. And I speak as a Republican who wouldn't have him for anything.
The royals know how significant Scotland is in the grand things. That's why I think the Queen expired up in Scotland. I'm sure that, you know, they plan all these things months in advance. And,
can I just say, sorry.
It was a big coup when she died in Scotland, and we had some of this ceremonial pap coming up to Scotland and as part of the funeral. And I just think while Westminster is very derogatory towards Scotland, I think that the royals know the value of the country and they don't want us to go. But
sorry, can I say, Roddy,
sure just
that just historically, the idea of him coming here to be crowned as King of Scots quite appeals to me, I have to say. And it can pray and aid the Charles II. He's going to be Charles III. Charles II was crowned King of Scots after his father was executed. And before he fled to the continent, and before Scotland was invaded by the Commonwealth, and was under military occupation for about 8 years. And then he was crowned in England, but he was crowned King of Scots first, before he fled, and just after his father was executed. And that's why Cromwell invaded. That little known part of Scottish history, where Cromwell invaded, had abolished the monarchy, abolished the parliament, abolished the judiciary, and Scotland was run under a military dictatorship for a period of maybe about 7 or 8 years by General Monk. It's one of these things which is just forgotten about. Dundee was ransacked in the same way that Drogheda had been ransacked by Cromwell's army over in Ireland. So Charles II is a good model for Charles III. I think he should come here and get crowned King of Scots here.
So he should. But the other one is when Bonnie Prince Charlie came down to Edinburgh on his way down to Derby before turning round. He annulled the Treaty of Union in Edinburgh Castle.
Yeah.
There's another bit that a lot of people didn't know. We'll just go, last question before we go. We all know we're all independentistas and we all want independence. That's why we get involved in politics. Suella Braverman, the English Home Secretary, has confirmed that the new British Human Rights Bill will not be compatible with the ECHR or the UNHCR. They're doing away with our rights, folks. If we ever needed another reason, this is it, Eva, is it not?
This is absolutely terrifying and utterly chilling. I could hardly bear to read her comments or to listen to her speaking. And one of the things that I found the most offensive about this is that if you're a woman and you've been trafficked and you're in a boat in the Channel and you've been raped or abused or whatever, sold, whatever, or you're a child and that's happened to you, you're getting sent back or you're getting sent to Rwanda. It's absolutely appalling. We need the hell out of there yesterday. We need to create our own immigration policy. We need to create our own Scottish policy for welcoming refugees. We need to live in a country that welcomes and supports refugees, not a country that's a warmonger that creates refugees and asylum seekers. I've really had enough of them this time. I really have.
And as they said in the 80s and 90s, you'll remember it, and of course, so will you, Steve. Independence, nothing less. That stays with me and has stayed with me all these years. We've come to the end. When he comes back, we keep losing poor old Steve there. He keeps bobbing in and out. And let me thank you for being here. I hope you'll not be a stranger now.
No, thanks for having me. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
We'll have you back. Don't say that when you start getting the hate mail. You know, you start getting the hate mail, don't see if you still think it's great.
Don't worry about that.
I send it. That's me that sends it. No. And to you as well, Steve, we've got to thank you for being here. And as I've just said to Andy, don't make it be a stranger. We have to have you back on and chat some more. Now, my big wish is the voting starts on Monday morning for the SNP leadership. And I hope that whoever is elected has if you like, that inspiration to unite the clans again, to bring us all back under the one umbrella, to heal the wounds and to move forward for our nation. And the only way we can do that is to get independence. And Humza, there is a way. If you need any help, come and see me. I'll give you a wee chat, mate. Anyone that wants to know, we can do it, but we have to do it together. So, gentlemen, ladies, thank you for your time again. And to you viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have. And until we see you again, you and yours, please take care.
Thanks, Roddy.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.